Hello, my name is Kyle, and this is the Top 3 show. This is the Conservative Take channel, and welcome. And for those of you who are not seeing this live, I'm going to do something at the end of this that I haven't done in the past. I'm actually going to go over some of the live comments as they come through. Sometimes people actually comment as I am doing this, but I don't have a chance to actually respond. So if you're doing this live, shoot your comments, and at the end of the thing, I will go over a little bit, and I will answer questions as I go through the questions, if there are any. So welcome to the channel again. My name is Kyle again, and this is the Top 3 show where we take 3 topics. Today it's just me. Normally I would take a partner and we would take one apiece, and then we would take a third one and collaborate. And if I ever have 3 on the show, we'll all take one or all collaborate on all 3. It doesn't really matter. The point is there's only 3 topics, and typically it's going to be a hot-button topic. Usually it's going to be pertinent to what's going on currently, and this absolutely this absolutely qualifies. So, as you know from the thumbnail and from the title, this is going to be covering primarily the interview with The Breakfast Club and Rush Limbaugh. They interviewed, I guess it was taped on Sunday. It aired today. I watched it twice, and I'm going to comment it all the way through, every single point. It's about a 30-minute interview. I'm going to cover every single point as best I can. I got some bullet notes here. I'm going to go through them all. If I ramble a little bit, I apologize, but again, I want to get through as much as I can. I have another story I want to do in the tail end of that. And so with that, before I jump into the Rush story, I want to talk about one that just happened. I guess it was last night. And this is really a heartbreaking one. I'm going to pop this up on the screen here. This is from Richmond, Virginia. And essentially what we're talking about here is during the riots, as we know, there's been all kinds of bad things that have been happening. People have been losing their businesses and so forth, and typical type stuff you see in this situation, but nothing outrightly, malicious at this level. And what we're seeing here is that rioters set fire to a home with a child inside, then blocked the firefighters access. And the police chief gave a press conference afterward. You see the link there, the thumbnail here at the bottom right here. That's from the Richmond Police Twitter page. And I'll leave links to this in the description. So I'm going to read this real quickly. It says, on Saturday, Richmond Police Chief Will Smith was overcome with emotion, detailing one of the worst acts of violence carried out in the city during the previous night's rioting, ostensibly over the death of George Floyd. According to Smith, rioters set fire to an occupied multifamily residence with a child inside, then repeatedly blocked firefighters' access to the scene. Thankfully, officers found a way to secure access and save the family, including the child. One incident that is particularly poignant, that truly illustrates the seriousness of the issues we're facing, Smith told reporters. Protesters intentionally set fire to an occupied building on West Broad Street. This not only occupied building that has been set fire in the past 2 days. And so I'm not going to read all of this, but, I just want to kind of emphasize what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with another level of tragedy, another visceral aspect of what we've been seeing around this country. We're seeing stuff that looks like it's organized, and it looks like it's not going to stop anytime soon. Several people, including Barack Obama, has called for a stop. Many people have called for a stop. There's clips all over the place of people from all walks of life saying, look, this has to come to an end. But I will have more to say on this on the third topic. So I want to lead in with that and just kind of set the tone of how serious this is getting. And this next thing I'm going to talk about here is essentially going to be the Rush Limbaugh interview that he did with Charlemagne, lowercase g, the God, and DJ Envy and Angela Yee. This is their Breakfast Club morning program. It's a syndicated program across the country, primarily an African-American audience. And I guess it's like the Tom and Joyner show, essentially, but I've never listened to it because I don't listen to radio other than sermons and talk, YouTube, whatever I'm coming in. So I don't watch their particular show. Also, I don't listen to radio either. However, it's a very popular show. And so what Rush Limbaugh said was that after he was going through last week and leading up to the weekend, he asked his staff, and the staff had told him and his people within his own community, the callers, everyone else were saying, hey, you need to get up with this crew, the Breakfast Club. And I think, and part of it was because Joe Biden and every single Democrat candidate has been on the show. And we did something on this as well last week, dealing with Charlemagne, the lowercase g God, and his leading into a question with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden saying, you ain't black if you don't vote for me. Okay. So part of that is, I'm sure, some of that, and they are really, really blowing up right now in talk radio. And so what Rush did essentially was this. So I'm going to go through these points. I watched it one on the Breitbart website, and then I watched it again on the YouTube channel, Rush Limbaugh Show. And in the Rush Limbaugh Show on YouTube, there's a link in the description for this right now. He actually kind of gives how this all started and what his thoughts were going into this. Because he says he normally doesn't do reaching out to other people to do interviews to bring him into a show. He never really does do interviews. I've never heard of him ever doing an interview other than, the president or Pence or other politicians, but never another pundit going into their particular environment and talking. And so for me, it was pretty powerful because Rush is the person who's like the super conservative bastion, right? He's a white guy, he smokes cigars, he plays golf, he's everything that the white supremacy, so-called people who say that, or the people who would say like white privilege, he would be the epitome of that. And so to go there and talk to a group like this, who is on the other end of the spectrum, not only politically, but also culturally, I thought it was pretty good. And I thought it was a really good interview. I know some people were saying, well, they were kind of rude to Rush, this and that. Look, that's just how black folks are. We get a little extra, right? We get a little emotional, but I think for the most part, it was very, very respectful. And they were just trying to come across like, look, we're not going to be real. We're going to be real about this. We're not going to let you slide on anything. So that's just how black folk is. So anyway, I didn't take it like that at all. My screen, here. So anyway, my screen kicked out. So anyway, so I'm going to go over these points. So the first thing that happened is this. So he comes on the show and he says, look, guys, I want to thank you so much for letting me on the show and this and that. And, but the one thing that I really thought was cool was he said, look, I am so down with you guys on this in terms of my pain and my anger and just the whole senselessness about this. He said, look, this was a tragedy of the utmost proportion. I want to come out and reach out to you guys and see what we can do and reach out, whatever. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he basically said, and then they basically said to him that there's a lot of anger over this situation. And I think it was Angela Yee was saying that, look, we are really frustrated and angry that this is happening all the time in our community and no one's doing anything about it. And, this isn't the first time it's happened, she mentioned. And we're just frustrated, we're angry, and boom, 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 boom. And Rush says, look, I know that's right. That's why I'm here. Let's talk about this. And so then they ask him, I believe it was DJ Envy asks him, look, so why are you just now coming to us with this? This has happened before. Why Floyd? Why are you coming to us now with Floyd? And Rush says, look, man, I'm just fed up. I am fed up. And I want to let people know that this is not who we are as a country. Talking about America. He said, this is not who we are. This is not who we are as a country. And then they pushed back on that and said, look, I take exception to that, Rush. I think, this country is set up for white people. I think that this is a country that is unfair and white supremacy and all that. And Trump, and Biden. And Rush steps back to him and says, look, it's not about that. It's not about Trump or Biden or any of this. It has to do with the fact that we are a country that was founded on individual freedoms. We are the only country in the world that has our freedoms inscribed in our founding documents. He said we're also the only country in the world that was founded to actually limit government. And I don't think that two topics to them really, or those 2 points really hit home with them at all. In fact, I don't even think they even knew that, but they insisted on saying that this country is set up to be against Black people. And to me, that was something that could be no further than the truth, because if we're dealing with Black people dealing with not having the abilities, that means that we're not doing the work that we need to do to get to where we are. And that's exactly what Rush was saying. He's like, look, how did you guys get to where you were? You know, you have the one of the most popular shows in the country. How is it that you were able to do what you've done to get a syndicated show where you are across the nation at the prime location of people driving to and from work, or I'm sorry, to work in the morning? It's a very difficult thing. How were you able to do that? What stopped you from doing that? That never got answered. So then they brought into the question of Kaepernick and basically saying, look, Rush, don't you understand that white privilege has to do with what Kaepernick did? This whole thing with the police doing what they did, why he kneeled is what he was protesting for, that he was saying, look, there's police brutality across this country. Why can't we, acknowledge that? Why can't you acknowledge that? And he was basically saying, look, and I said, well, in the seriousness, if this situation had been reversed, where Floyd had been a white person or a white man, we probably never would have heard about this. And that was a situation that I think that they didn't want to acknowledge, but they wanted to basically push back on to say that sorry about that. They want to say that no, it's a situation where it's systemic racism, and that there's no way in the world that you should not be able to know that. And so what ended up happening next was they said, okay, well, look, let's just change gears and let's talk about President Obama. They said with President Obama, you said back when he was president that it's the president's job to inspire the nation, to tone down the things that we see in society where things are going like this, riots and discrimination and so forth. What is your take on that? Don't you think that President Trump should have the same kind of standard? And Rush Limbaugh said, yes, exactly. He said, that's the president's job. All of the presidents have that responsibility. It's their responsibility to be the president for the entire country. So then they asked him, he asked him, well, how do we end white privilege? How is it that we in this country, if we have all this stuff going on and we have this problems going on with white supremacy and all of this white privilege that you're calling, how do we end the racism part? And that didn't get answered really, really well, because what they said was, I think this was Charlemagne, he said that it's a systemic, no, I'm sorry, this was DJ Envy. He basically said, look, this is a situation where this country has been systemically suppressed with racism, and that every single president has a responsibility to deal with that. And I have a clip here that I'm going to cover right now that deals with that. And I'm going to cover this whole audio here. It's about 2.5 minutes. I'm going to play it right now for you right here.
Tell me how to end it. What can we do to end this so that you are not frustrated and angry and feeling like whatever you feel like? Because I hate it. I hate you guys. We're all Americans here, and I don't like the fact that you're angry all the time. So what can we do to stop the racism?
Here's the thing, right? As long as there's a system of white supremacy, there will always be these type of situations. It doesn't matter who's in the White House if that person is not willing to dismantle the mechanism of white supremacy. If that person is not willing to change legislation that disproportionately impacts black folks, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've seen this a million times.
Okay, tell me what happened.
Riots.
You had 4 years of Barack Obama. You had Americans, white Americans, voting for Obama because they wanted to say we're not racist. We're not a racist country. You had people electing the first African American president in our history. He served for 8 years. Why isn't there anything to show for it that makes you less angry than you were then?
Once again, it doesn't matter who's in the White House if that person is not willing to dismantle the mechanism of white supremacy.
Come on, guys. Elections don't matter now?
Well, here's the thing. I think that when we got to stop acting like white supremacy isn't done by design. The whole function of systemic racism is to marginalize black people. And it's very hard to get any damn near 80-year-old white man to change a system that's been working for him and his family for years. I don't care if it's Biden or Trump. So once again, we need people that are willing to dismantle the mechanism of white supremacy.
Okay, so let me ask you guys, why do you still vote Democrat?
I vote for whoever I think is the best candidate.
Because Democrat Party has been promising to fix your grievances for 50 years, and you have the same grievances, you have the same complaints. They haven't done a damn thing for you. They haven't even punished the people that you think are responsible for the racism and bigotry being done to you. Why do you keep supporting them?
And you know, I don't disagree with you, and that's why I'm not letting nobody politicize black pain and tell us that this is one person's fault just because they're trying to win an election in November. This is America's fault. And the war on drugs, mass incarceration, segregation, slavery, all of those things are and have been the proverbial knee on the back of black folks' neck. And until somebody is willing to dismantle the mechanism of white supremacy, nothing is going to change.
So that was a lot. So essentially what they're basically saying was that slavery and the war on drugs, mass incarceration, segregation, at the end of that, he was basically saying that these were the institutions of slavery, institutions of racism that has kept this country and been in the knee in the back of black people. And that, to me, is a very, very powerful statement. But here's the pushback that I have on this. Number one, they gave Obama totally a pass on that first part because, you know, first you want to say that it's systemic, and then later on they're going to say that, well, have you ever been pushed into a cop car? Have you ever been treated badly? That's anecdotal evidence coming at it with the defense of a systematic problem. Anecdotal evidence doesn't prove anything systematic, and that's one of the big issues that I'm going to talk about a little bit later after I get through this rambling that I'm doing. I'm not doing a really good job on it, but I'm trying my best. So, but what he said was he listed four things. He said the war on drugs, which essentially was Ronald Reagan. Okay. Then he mentioned mass incarceration, which was basically Joe Biden and Bill Clinton. Segregation, Democrat Party, and slavery, pretty much the Democrat Party. So, you know, it's funny how three of the four things that he mentioned as being the foundations for systemic racism and white supremacy in this country that he defines is all being created by Democrats, except for the mass incarceration, the war on drugs. But I would argue that that's a result of Democrat policies. Okay, that's just trying to fix a situation with drugs coming to the country from, you know, coming through Miami and so forth and infiltrating our country. So I would give him a pass on that. So okay, so anyway, so here's the deal, guys. So then they asked, after all that, they asked him this. They said, look, what would you do? They asked Rush this. They said, Rush, what would you do with the situation here, with the situation in Minneapolis? What would you do? He said, first of all, and this surprised me, this answer, he said they should try the police officer with first-degree murder, and that they should also charge the other cops as being complicit, and also charge him as well. Because he said, I quote here, there should be no legalized murder in America. And I agree with that. Okay. And he also went on to say that Ferguson, that Floyd was a good guy. He was a family guy. You know, he had all of this going for him, the family and stuff like that. And so what Rush was doing was he was really trying to empathize and show compassion, because I think a lot of times conservatives are portrayed to black people as being these ruthless, uncaring, unforgiving, pick yourself up by the bootstraps kind of people. And I think that's resentful to a lot of people, particularly black people. But the thing is, if you just come to the average black person who at least talk to you, you can win them over, if not in your ideas, but in your attempt to win them over. You know, to show that you care, to show that you empathize, to show that you're on their side. You may not agree on how to get there, but I think this conversation actually could have gotten a lot better had they had more time. And I'm going to get to the last part here about the white privilege and all that stuff, and how I think that was really a big issue here. And also proving a systemic system of racism when there's laws on the books to prevent systemic racism. Okay, so anyway, so then they basically asked him about Rush. They asked Rush about the media lies. They said, well, hey, since you're in the media, what do you think about the media's portrayal of this? And Rush basically said, look, you know, for the past 3 or 4 years, the media's been lying about everything. They've been lying about, you know, so much stuff. And he said it's not just CNN, it's also Fox News, it's Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. They're all lying in ways that people can't trust them anymore. And so there's no backstop to go to, no foundation that we can trust to really get any information. And I saw that a lot with the COVID virus thing. You know, the CDC would say one thing, the WHO would say something, and it would be different. And then they would come back a week later and change their thing. The Surgeon General said masks are not needed. Then they're needed. And Fauci said they're needed, not needed. It just goes on and on and on. And that's just with the COVID crisis, right? Other things with the all the different things that are going on with the Michael Flynn thing going on, with the Russia scandal and all that. It's just been a nightmare, and no one trusts the media. And so basically he said also that this mistrust also has helped to create the unrest, which I find ironic because the media wants to poke and prod, and then they want to mislead, and then they want to wonder why the country is burning. You know, that's one thing that I have an issue with as well. So then Angela Yee came up and said, she had a question. Basically, it was kind of loaded, but it was a question. It said about President Trump. She said, well, Trump's using rhetoric with Twitter and so forth, where he's calling people thugs, which, by the way, Obama called people thugs in Baltimore as well. So we should mention that. She mentioned that he sicking dogs on people if they come to the White House. I'm not familiar with that quote. I'll look into that. But then she said about very fine people. Again, a misquote from the Charlottesville deal. It's just all these different things they have in there just really them aren't true at all. But Rush really couldn't push back on this stuff because there's not much time in this interview to chase every single rabbit. So basically, Rush said, look, what Trump needs to do, since I said before that every president needs to address this sort of thing to the people, be the president for everybody, and show compassion and try to calm people down and say it's going to be okay and so forth, rise above the situation. But he said that what he needs to do is simply show his God-given humility, which they didn't like very much because they don't think that he was very humble. They basically pushed back on that and said he's not humble at all. But then Rush said, look, if you don't know the guy. If you go to some of his rallies and see how he talks to people and how he appreciates them being there and so forth. And I've seen that. A lot of the stuff he does on stage in front of the media and on Twitter, it's a lot of it is just for show. It's a shtick. It's a way to use a bully pulpit to get things across. He plays mind games on people to get things done. But in the end of the day, he's just a human being like all of us. And I believe he does have compassion. We can see what he did with the crime reform bill and the CARES Act. And well, it's not the CARES Act, but other acts he's done. I can't remember the other one, but the First Try Act, or the First Try or Last Try Act, where you can try experimental drugs after, before they've been approved and so forth. So he's done a lot of legislation in regards of helping people that hasn't really been said much at all in the media. So then essentially they basically said that, well, how do you feel about the white people that have been coming to the rallies, coming to the riots and the protests? What do you feel about the people who are white who've been coming to our events and standing in our line hand in hand and, supporting us? And so he basically said, you know what? It's because they also are fed up. See, what you don't understand, guys, this is Rush talking, is that America is mourning with you. You need to understand that we're all upset by this, and which is one of the reasons why I'm here, so that you can know that. And then he went to talk about how, and then they asked him about, I'm sorry, I kind of skipped ahead here. So going back to President Trump, they basically asked him about what he can do. And then they said, well, then Rush basically said, look, I feel the president's kind of fed up. Okay. For the past 3.5 years, he's been lied about. He's been attacked. And this whole thing with the COVID-19 epidemic came in at a time when Black unemployment was at an all-time low. And next thing you know, we lose 40 million jobs. So he's got to be pretty frustrated about that. So, that's kind of the pushback on him not being humble, or him not showing humility. And so that was part of it as well. I know I'm rambling, guys, but I'm just trying to get this as quickly as possible. And so then he tries to ask him again. This is Rush. He tries to ask him, how do we dismantle this thing? How do we dismantle white supremacy, white privilege? And, this is what I want to talk about, because the real core issue is a level of definition. And I'm going to bring something up here. It's by Jordan Peterson. It's a quote that he did. And here it is. He says here, I think the idea of white privilege is absolutely reprehensible. And it's not because white people are privileged. Most people have privileges of all sorts. And you should be grateful for your privileges and work to deserve them. But the idea that you can target an ethnic group with a collective crime, regardless of the specific innocence or guilt of the constituent elements of that group, there is absolutely nothing that is more racist than that. It's absolutely abhorrent. And that's the definition that Jordan Peterson has. He's a brilliant guy. If you know who he is, check him out. But that's what he's saying white privilege is. What they're saying white privilege is, if you really layer it down, they're saying that it's something systematic in the laws, but it's not really in the laws. What's happening is it's the prejudicial nature of mankind, of human beings. And there's a lot of things that go into that, okay? And a lot of it has to do with perception, has to do with education. And as it comes to law enforcement, maybe it just comes down to having law enforcement officers who are just better equipped. Maybe it's and trained. Maybe it's making the police environment such that more people of higher standards will want to come in. They're having a hard time getting police officers. So they're having to get who they can get because they got to man the streets. They got to keep the public safe. So they have to do what they have to do. But if the media is constantly bashing them, saying they're evil and this and this, who wants to be part of that? What kind of person are you going to get? What kind of cop are you going to get? It's going to leave you with the cops that aren't going to be the best cops. And I've talked about this with a law enforcement officer here on the show many times. And so I would say that. And also, and so that's Jordan's aspect of it. Their aspect of it is that it's how we're being treated, being mugged, not mugged, but basically being mugged by the police officers when you're walking down the street, not doing anything wrong. If you're being, if you're being treated differently on the street, again, that's more of a human issue. That's a human issue that we have to be aware of and we can learn about. And it also comes down to your worldview and your perception of mankind. And that's when I would go into a spiritual realm of the Bible, and I would totally talk about that before I talk about anything else, because that really is going to be your main point of solution there. But that's a whole nother topic of a different day and different time. So what Rush's definition was that white privilege is nothing more than a politicized charge against people to shut down conversation, to shut down debate. It's a liberal construct of the Democrat Party. And as you heard earlier, the Democrats really, the Angela Yee and DJ and Charlemagne didn't say anything about the Democrats. In fact, they even didn't even disagree with when he said that the Democrats for the past 50 years haven't done anything for Black people. I mean, Rush boldly said that. He said, look, they have done nothing. And there was no retort to that at all. They knew that. And so again, they're coming at it with anecdotal evidence because they came to him and said, hey, Rush, have you ever been pulled over by the cops and mistreated, whatever? And Rush said, well, maybe once, but not really. I admit that. And so they're taking this anecdotal evidence again, and then putting it onto the entire system and blaming white people for that. And then even saying to the point, well, white people need to come to us and agree that this is true before we can even begin debate. Because Rush even said later on, he said, look, time's running out, but let's keep talking about this. Let's keep talking. Let's end the discussion here, but let's pick it up right from here, dealing with the white privilege and white supremacy. And then they came back to him kind of snarky and said, hey, well, we would do that if you come correct and you don't, if we're not dancing. In other words, if you don't come back on our show and say that you admit or agree that what we feel white privilege is not true, then we have nothing to talk about. And that's why these kind of discussions need a much deeper breadth in terms of where you're going with it. You have to identify the worldview. You have to identify what's anecdotal, what's actual. And what I would do personally, if I was talking to them, I would say, okay, show me which piece of legislation right now in the book, because Charlemagne mentioned this. He said, whoever can rewrite the legislation that will stop stepping on the necks of Black people, I'm using that term myself. He didn't use that term. Then that's what we would be all about. And then he went in to say about Barack Obama being, been there 8 years. He hasn't done anything. Why aren't you blaming him? And they basically said, look, it's because the institution of white supremacy is so pervasive. It doesn't matter who the president is, which to me is a cop-out. It's a total cop-out. Rush was like, look, you mean to tell me elections don't matter? And they said, well, no. It's just, it's a whole shell game. It's a way of getting people to confide to their rules to be able to shut down debate for something that is totally, in my opinion, false. Now, if you can show me some legislation that is inherently racist, then let's get rid of it. And my other question is, let's say there is legislation that is racist. What are you going to replace it with? What you think that affirmative action is going to work? That was a disaster in a lot of areas. And so I don't know what kind of policies you're going to put in place that's going to be beneficial to Black people on the long, in the long term, other than the issues that I've talked about on this show many, many times: the fatherless rate, working with the nuclear family, working with neighborhoods to work with the police, maybe get neighborhoods to actually have a partnership with the police and actually encourage neighbors of these communities to actually join the police force and govern their own communities. I mean, there's lots of solutions out there that are practical. Empowerment zones, school choice, many things we can do that can help uplift the community that's already there, but it's being struck down either through legislation or through lobbies or through unions or whatever. If we can cut through some of that stuff, I think we can get a lot of stuff done because there's a lot of stuff already in place that's already going to be beneficial, that's already been proven to be beneficial. All right, so they talked about the 40 million people who are being unemployed, and Rush said, look, we never should have shut the country down. That was something that was ridiculous, that of course people are going to be pent up. They're angry, they don't have any food, they're hungry, it's hot. What do you expect is going to happen? So this whole COVID-19 pandemic, shutting the country down was looking to be like a huge mistake. And I think now we're regretting it. And so I'm gonna wrap this thing up here with this particular segment. He basically said that, it's used to shut down things. And they basically talked some more. And they talked about Martin Luther King Jr., that he was killed for white supremacy. And then that they went into the whole thing about, Rush, have you ever been pulled over by the cops and that kind of stuff? Is there any anecdotal evidence that would prove to you that what we're saying is true? And he said, well, not really. There's one time maybe. So that was going to be all of that particular section there. And I want to, I mentioned that already. So we're good. So now I want to just talk about right now the section here, the third section here. And this is a little bit more in the weeds, a little bit more tinfoil hat kind of deal. But I want to mention it because I think it's important. The white people that have come join our cause. And that's very fascinating because what I've been saying on social media networks and Twitter and so forth is that these people are hijacking, many people are hijacking the Black Lives Matters movements, the red, black, and brown community movement. And the whole thing with this is, the black, brown, what I'm talking about. That group. So anyway, this guy here, his name is, I got it right here. His name is Chaziel Sunz, and he has a video out there on YouTube. It's got about 214,000 views so far, probably more than that now. And this guy was supposedly a Black Lives Matter Ferguson organizer, and he has a lot to say about the situation with what's going on right now in the Black community and how they're being infiltrated by Antifa and other organizations that don't really care about Black people. They just want to get the numbers up because they have their own agenda. And I said this before in other areas that the Black Lives Matter movement has its place in the constructs of what they're trying to do. If they expand it maybe a little bit more, I like the interview with Candace Owens and Hawk Newsom, where they kind of had some common area there. If they could expand it to more Black on Black crime and expand on it in the fact of the disproportional rate that Blacks are aborted in Black communities with Planned Parenthood, I think then they would have a holistic look at it. And we're going to see it as not just white on Black, but also things that we can do to help ourselves from an accountability standpoint. But I think BLM was actually infiltrated way, way early. And they were used to basically say, hey, look, white people are bad. Let's join cause. And we can get with this Antifa group, this leftists, these anarchists who basically hate America. And they want to use the platform of black people and use their emotions and manipulate them so they can use them to get their agenda because they don't have the numbers to do it. And they know that if they can get the black sign up on this, or the black, I guess, if they can get them to sign on to this, all of a sudden the media will also come on board because, the entertainment will come part of it because black people are really influenced by entertainment and sports and so forth. And that will also be a much bigger platform for them. And so that's what this guy is saying. And he's saying it's going to end badly. And this, I'm not sure when this actually was. I think it was probably in 2018. I'm not sure, but he almost as much predicts what's going on right now, which is kind of weird. I don't know more about this tape. I don't know if it's legitimate or not in terms of his timing, but what he's saying hits a lot of solid points that I've been saying for a long time. So I'd recommend you to check that out as well. All right. So I will say that this format was not the best, and some technical difficulties here. I was trying to get through it, but I think I got what I want to say. And if you want to check out that particular interview with Rush, there's a link below. It's queued up exactly to the point. It's like an hour and a half video, but I queued it up exactly where the interview starts, and you can play it out for about 30 minutes and you can get all of it. And so, yeah, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to look to see if there's any comments out here, and I'm going to talk about any of those. Doesn't look like there's many of those comments out there, so I'm not going to deal with that because I don't have to. So with that, I'm going to end this live stream. I'm going to end this top 3. And if you like what we do here, this is kind of thing that I do, but I fly by the seat of my pants sometimes. I prep this for about 2 hours prior to going live. And so I know I'm still working on the format. But if you like what we're doing, regardless of what you've seen here, and at least the information, give me a like and subscribe, and comment below on how things can improve, and share with your friends. Like I said before, we're trying to expand this so we can get to 10,000 subscribers. And so with that, I'm going to leave some other links in here for those who are not watching this live. Please check out some content that we have right here.